Okay, now I'm going to go through balancing an equation. So I'm going to use that same equation that I just wrote. So sodium sulfate and calcium chloride makes sodium chloride and calcium sulfate. Now you might just want to put your brackets around just so you remember that that is a molecular line and we treat it as a whole kind of being. It's got an overall charge on its own. We have already checked the formulas, so we know the formulas are correct because we've checked our positive ions and negative ions are equal in each of the compounds. So now we can balance. And again, as you get better at balancing, you'll be able to just look at that and work it out. I might just use a red pen. All right. So the longhand guaranteed never to fail technique is you put your T underneath. You then list all of the elements and you only list every element once. So in here, sodium, sulfur, remembering that an element symbol is a capital, or if it's got two letters in the symbol, it's upper and lower. And be very careful that when you're writing out your symbols, that you write them in the size that they are so you don't confuse yourself. Oxygen is the next one, calcium and chlorine. Right, then I know that in a chemical reaction, whatever I have over here, I'm going to have over here. I don't lose anything and I don't gain anything. The numbers might adjust to make it equal, but I'm not going to gain a new element and I'm not going to lose any elements. So I'm going to write them out in the order that I wrote the first list out in. That makes for easy checking. Then I'm going to count up the atoms of each element here. Remembering, if it's got no number, it's a 1. So sodium, I have 2. Sulfur, remember the 4 is just for that O. Sulfur, I have 1. Oxygen, 4. Calcium, 1. Chlorine, 2. Then I go over here and do exactly the same. Sodium, 1. Sulfur, 1. Oxygen, 4. Calcium, 1. And chlorine, 1. Now you can see here that this is not balanced yet. Sulfur is okay, oxygen is okay, calcium is okay, chlorine is also not balanced. So I pick one, and my advice is to pick one that's easy to fix. Remember, balancing is big, balancing numbers at the front of the whole compound, and it affects the whole compound, not the next one, just the one it's in front of. You can't put big numbers in between the element symbols. You can't change the little numbers or put extra little numbers in because that's changing the formula, and we've already established the formulas are correct. So you find something where you can put a big number and fix it. So we've got 2 sodiums over here, but only 1 over here. So I'm going to double the compound that contains sodium. I'm going to put a big 2 there, and the 2 is like I've put brackets outside of that whole compound, so it applies to everything. Every time I put a big number, I'm going to adjust everything inside. So 2, instead of 1 sodium, I now have 2 sodiums. It also affects the chlorine. So now instead of 1 chlorine, I've got 2. Then I can go down my list again. So after each adjustment, I check my list. 2, 1, 4, it's equal. 1s are equal. 2s are equal. So I've actually balanced all of my elements. They're all the same on each side. Therefore, that is now a balanced equation. And it's that easy. Remember, balancing equations, if you can't balance it, the first check is, right, have I correctly added up my atoms? Sometimes we have like oxygen might feature in both of these compounds. And if it does, be careful that you don't go and write it twice, because then you'll be trying to adjust 2 lots of oxygen. Okay, so check that you've only written each element once, and if it features more than once in your 2 compounds, then make sure you add up the total using everything that's there. So if oxygen was here and here, your total for oxygen would be the 4 that are there and any oxygens that are here. So it would obviously be more than 4. So check that first. Then if that's all good, you may have made a mistake in your chemical formulas. So go back and check those. All right, if it is not balancing, you have made a mistake, because if you've got your chemical formulas correct, and if you have added up the number of atoms correctly, it will balance. Okay, that's all for now.